Hey mamas, and welcome to the Entering Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Marie Bilger, a wife, mom of two, VBAC mama, and doula. Join us every episode to learn from professionals, special guests, and moms just like you, ensuring that you know what you need to know and discover things that you didn't know before. I believe in you. Let's doula this, and let's navigate the transition of entering motherhood together. Hey mamas, I'm so excited to share this episode with you. I wanted to share it back in April when it was Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month, but we chat with Sarah, who is a doula who specializes in pregnancy after loss. She goes by the PAL Doula or the PAL Doula on Instagram, and she shares her personal journey in this episode with us and her experiences with pregnancy after loss and how those have shaped her mission to support other mothers who are also going through this journey. She specifically discusses the emotional challenges of pregnancy after loss, the need for community support, and also fears that come up not only for the person experiencing loss, but for partners and those around them as well. This episode shows the need for coexistence of grief, hope, and joy during loss. So I know that you're going to get something out of this, whether it's a personal experience or somebody that you know that's going through loss. And with that, let's get this conversation started. All right. Hello and welcome to Entering Motherhood. I'm so excited to have you here today and get this conversation started. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for the listeners?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited and looking forward to this so much. So, my name is Sarah, and I'm on social media as the PAL Doula or the Pregnancy After Loss Doula, depending on what platform you're on. I live in Western North Carolina, like halfway between Asheville, North Carolina, and Greenville, South Carolina. So I do a lot in both of those places. I'm married to the most amazing man. His name's Colton. We have a baby in heaven and a baby here with us. Our baby here is named Josiah. And then I have a dog named Trex who is eating his food very noisily in the corner over there. You can probably hear him. But my husband owns a construction company and I'm the office manager for his construction company. And then I also work as a doula, specializing in pregnancy after loss. And yeah.
Yeah. I think it's awesome because I'm pretty sure we connected online first and then realized that we live so close and then actually ended up going to doula dinner one night.
Yep.
And chatting and talking and hearing a little bit about your story in more detail. And since then, we've just connected at different events and different things. And
here and there randomly.
Yeah, it's been really fun. So I think it's really cool what you're doing. And I would love to kind of just go back and really just start talking about what your journey specifically was like when you were entering motherhood. And then we can obviously flow into what specifically you're doing now in more detail. So how about you go back then and start letting us know about your entrance to motherhood.
Sure. I feel like my entrance to motherhood started with my entrance into birth work, which started with my own birth. So almost 30 years ago. That's crazy to say. But I am a twin, and my twin sister and I were born 2 months apart, which was kind of crazy. And so she was born at 24 weeks. I wasn't born until 33 weeks. And I grew up hearing our crazy birth story. And there was a lot of birth trauma there with premature birth. And I was an emergency C-section and NICU stays and all of that. But then there's 3 siblings after me, and they were all VBAC. So grew up hearing their totally normal birth stories. And then when I was 9-ish, my parents' best friends had their baby in our house. So that was my first exposure to like out of hospital home birth. I didn't see the birth itself, but I heard it. And then they let me come down soon enough to see the cord be cut and to see the placenta and to watch the midwives weigh the baby and all of that kind of stuff. And I just thought birth is so cool. And number 1, I can't wait to be a mommy. And number 2, I want to be the one who helps mommies when babies are born. And those 2 things, like, were my what I got out of watching this baby be born. And so fast forward years later, I started college in pre-med actually, planning to be an OBGYN and hated my pre-med classes. So I ended up switching to something else in college and finished school, but got married fresh out of college and then started midwife school in January of 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020. So I could not continue midwife school at that time because I couldn't do clinicals with the pandemic and all of that. But part of midwife school was to take a doula training. So I took a doula training, just found like the cheapest one I could find online. But that continued my obsession with birth. And I was like, this is the coolest. And so part of that doula training brought back all of this like, oh yeah, home birth. I remember home birth. That happened in my house one time. And that's what I want someday. And when I brought up home birth to my husband, we weren't pregnant. We weren't trying to get pregnant at that time. But I said, I think I want a home birth whenever the time comes. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, like it's gonna be really cool. Like so we talked about home birth a lot, and he was very concerned and worried about out of hospital birth. But he was like, "Okay, I trust you. You're the one who's going to do this, and whatever you want to do, I'll back you up 100%." We started trying in the summer of 2020 for our first baby and got pregnant and found out the Sunday after Thanksgiving that we were pregnant. And super excited. I remember, like, I brought my husband a pregnancy test at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, look, it's positive. And he's like, what does that mean? And I said, it means we're going to have a baby. We're going to be parents. And we just had this like super naive view of pregnancy, that a positive pregnancy test equals a living baby, right? And so that was the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And 3 days before Christmas, I had just a little bit of spotting. And I was a doula, so I knew that spotting could be normal. But my gut was like, this isn't normal. And I chose to listen to my intuition and called the OB because I hadn't established care with a midwife or anything yet. And so I just called the OB in town and I was like, hey, I'm pregnant and I'm having a little bit of bleeding. And it wasn't really that significant. But I was like, I'm concerned. Can I schedule an appointment? And they were like, sure, come in tomorrow. So I went in first thing in the morning. And again, it was 2020. So my husband couldn't come with me. And because it was a holiday, he didn't have to go into work. So he stayed home. And this was 2 days before Christmas. And I went in and was told those terrible words that I'm sure so many listeners have heard, that there is no heartbeat. And it didn't quite settle in my brain yet. Like I could see the ultrasound screen. I knew based on my dates that I should be about 7 weeks. The baby was clearly only about 5. And that I couldn't see a heartbeat and I knew what to look for. So like I knew that something was wrong, but there was still this little piece of hope in my heart. And so I asked tons of questions, and my main question was, what are the chances that we're wrong? What are the chances that maybe my dates are just wrong, or my baby's growing slower than normal or something, and what are the chances? And they said, well, there's probably about a 15% chance that we're wrong. And that was all that I needed. And I was like, okay, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to schedule a DNC. We're not going to do anything. I'm just going to come back in a week and we'll do another ultrasound and see. So went home and like super devastated, but still clinging onto that little tiny bit of hope. So told my husband, we both cried. And then we called our parents to say, hey, you guys are going to be grandparents, but chances are you have to wait until heaven to meet this grandbaby. That was one of the hardest phone calls that we've ever had to make, to tell our parents that. And my in-laws were coming in the next day. So I had to go to the grocery store and get groceries to be able to feed more than just my husband and I. And my sister-in-law has some food allergies and stuff. So I went to Target because I knew that I could get pizza that she could eat there, like dairy-free, gluten-free pizza. But the pizza aisle was right next to the baby clothes aisle in that Target. And I think at that point it hit me that my baby was dead and there was no way that we were bringing this baby home. And so I sat on the floor in that Target and cried my eyes out and just completely brokenhearted. I didn't even get the pizza. I left my cart and I left my cart in the pizza aisle and left the Target and had to come back a couple days later and get all of the groceries. So New Year's Eve, we had our follow-up appointment and found out nothing had changed, and which by that point I was pretty convinced that that's what was happening. But I was still having all kinds of pregnancy symptoms. I was still nauseous and still having food aversions. And I remember my in-laws are from Wisconsin, and so they brought like real Wisconsin brats for when they came down for Christmas, and I couldn't even look at them. Like, the thought of sausage was so nauseating to me. And yeah, couldn't eat those brats. And I sat in the bathroom and cried because, well, that was on Christmas Day. And the bleeding got a little bit worse on Christmas Day. And I just sat in the bathroom and cried and was like, I can't have brats because I'm pregnant, but I'm not actually pregnant because this baby is dead. And like, it was just such a complicated range of emotions that I was having. So we went back New Year's Eve and found out nothing had changed. And they gave us the option of doing a DNC, which is a dilation and curettage, which they give you Cytotec just like they do with an induction to make your cervix dilate. And then they use a scraping tool to take out the baby and the placenta. And they call it products of conception, which is so inhumane to me. Or we could choose to miscarry naturally if my body would do that. And so we chose the latter. I wanted the closure of being able to labor and deliver my baby if I could. I wasn't even sure if it would really be like labor, but I was like, there's a baby in here and the baby has to be born somehow. So surely it'll be some sort of labor. And they just told me, it'll be like a heavy period, which, spoiler alert, it is not like a heavy period when you miscarry. So the evening of January 5th, I started feeling contractions and I was like, oh, it is like a birth. I was right. And like, probably just because I was a doula already and had coached moms through labor so many times, I was like, okay, this is contractions. And just the doula part of my brain took over. I was like, I was squeezing a comb and like doing all of the things that you do during labor with my 5-week-old baby, 10-week-old placenta, pregnancy. And told my husband, hey, I'm in labor. This baby's going to be born tonight, probably. And I checked my cervix and I was like 2 centimeters dilated at one point. And I was in total doula mode, which I think the disassociation from my pregnancy kind of helped with that, with being able to just cope and make decisions and whatever. Well, at like 3:00 in the morning, I couldn't get up from the toilet because I was bleeding so much. And I didn't know, and now I do, that I was bleeding too much and that what I was experiencing was not normal for a miscarriage. And I ended up passing out on the bathroom floor, and my husband took me to the emergency room. And I don't know how many details you want, but went to the emergency room, which was only about 10 minutes from our house. And I think my husband's was speeding trying to get there. He was really afraid that I was going to pass out again. We got to the ER and they were more concerned with asking me the COVID screening questions than they were about the fact that there was literally a path of blood following us into the ER. They could care less that I was bleeding out. They were really just concerned that I didn't have COVID, which was ridiculous. And when my husband was like, hey, she's dying over here, we need to get her into a room, then they called security on him and had him escorted out by security. And they weren't going to allow him into the ER anyway because COVID. So I get into the room and like the security guard wheeled me in a wheelchair into the room and put me in like the hospital bed. And then the doctor came in and the doctor didn't know what was going on because they didn't give him any information. So he was trying to understand what was going on. And I was able somehow to communicate to him that I was having a miscarriage, but I was very out of it because when you lose as much blood as I had, then your brain doesn't work right. And so at one point, I finally grabbed his arm and I said, hey, I need you to understand that I'm going to pass out again. And then I did, passed out in the hospital bed. And when I came to, they finally were taking me seriously. And they had IVs in both of my arms. And I was hearing people talking about transfusion, which they never ended up having to do a transfusion, but it was really scary. And I remember thinking, I should be really scared right now, but I'm not. And I'm a Christian, and I believe that my husband and my parents and his parents are all praying for me, and that the Lord gave me a peace that I mean, the Bible talks about a peace that passes all understanding, and it really did, like, surpass understanding because I had this peace that I couldn't understand, and I knew that I should be freaked out, but I wasn't, and it was kind of, no matter what happens, this is God's plan for me, and He's in control.
Mm.
So, there was a whole lot of things that happened, more traumatic things that I'll spare you the details, but my baby was born in the emergency room, and we had called the baby Peanut from the moment we found out we were pregnant, so we just continued calling him Peanut. We still call him Peanut, and the doctor had, like, this whole demeanor change where he was super cold and distant until my baby was born, and then all of a sudden, he was very kind and warm and gentle, and he brought the baby to me so that I could meet him, and then he brought the baby out to the waiting room and had the nurse call my husband to come into the waiting room so my husband could meet him too, which was very kind, and I'm pretty sure broke hospital policy in some way. You're not supposed to take, I guess, technically a baby who's born that early is a biohazard, and you're not supposed to take them out of the hospital, but he did so that my husband could meet our baby. About that time, it was shift change, and it just so happened that one of my parents' really good friends, their daughter is one of my best friends, and Sherry is kind of like my second mom. It just happened that she was coming on shift, and she saw my husband in our car in the parking lot and knew something was wrong. And so she went to him and got the story from him, and she prayed with him, and they had lost a baby before my best friend, Caitlin. And so she understood loss. She understood exactly what we were going through. So she clocked in and she came straight to my room. And she prayed with me and talked with me and encouraged me. And that was exactly what my heart needed in that moment, was to see a familiar face, somebody who understood what was going on. Eventually, I was discharged. I went home. I was a teacher at the time at a tiny little Christian school here in Brevard. And the principal was like, "You need to take a couple of days off and you'll be okay. We'll get a sub and everything will be fine." And so they kind of forced me to rest. And they were like, "You just went through something really traumatic. You need to rest." And then the day that I was supposed to go back to school, it snowed here, which in the South is a really big deal when it snows. And so that gave me a whole extra day to rest because everything got canceled and, like, people were not driving. It was one of the biggest snowstorms I've ever seen here. January of 2021, you probably remember. It was a big snowstorm. So that was our loss. And then being a doula, I was like, I'm sure that there are hundreds of moms who go through this and are less prepared than I was.
Mhm.
They don't know that they're going through a birth. They don't have any resources. They don't know anything. So I started searching and just scouring the internet to find if there was anybody who was supporting moms through loss. And I found several who supported moms through loss, but as we continued life, we decided to start trying again right away for another baby. And I started searching for anyone who supported moms during a pregnancy after a loss, and I couldn't find anyone. There was no one on Instagram, Facebook, just scouring the internet, like, I couldn't find anything. And the more my husband and I talked about it, the more he was like, "You need to be that person." And I was like, "But I've never been through the pregnancy after a loss." And he was like, "Who cares? You're a doula, you know a lot about pregnancy. You're a loss mom, so you know a lot about loss. You need to be the one who supports moms through pregnancy after loss." September of 2021, I took a bereavement doula training so that I would understand more losses than just my own and understand what all loss entails at every gestation. And that was the first time that I ever heard the term first trimester birth instead of miscarriage. And that felt so much better to me because a miscarriage makes it feel like it's my fault. But a first trimester birth is like, oh, yeah, that's what it is. It was a birth that happened in the first trimester. And learned so many things from that training. I really was hesitant to start anything specific to pregnancy after loss. Like, I was really afraid to niche down to that. But Instagram deleted my Instagram account that I already had for my doula business in November of 2021. And my husband was like, "Well, maybe that's your sign that you should just go for it." So on a whim, I started the Pregnancy After Loss Doula Instagram account. And within 2 months had over 300 followers, which doesn't seem like a huge number, but starting from scratch, that was huge to me. And that was more than I ever had with my first doula. Instagram account. And people kept messaging me and going, this is what we need. We are looking for someone who supports moms through pregnancy after loss. We need you. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to turn it into a whole business. And so January of 2022, I started like a website and turned it into a whole business of supporting moms through pregnancy after loss. I've been able to talk to a lot of moms, even if they don't necessarily purchase something from me. Every mom gets some level of support from me. And so in that way, I've touched thousands of lives and thousands of moms who have been pregnant after loss. I mean, most of that time I was struggling with we couldn't get pregnant and infertility. And we didn't want to go a medical route of infertility treatment. We wanted to do things as naturally as we could if that was possible. So I'm going to say it was April, I finally found someone who would listen to me about my concerns. April 2022. So that was a year and a half after our loss, just about, that finally somebody listened to me. And I was pretty sure that the reason for my loss was low progesterone. And no one in North Carolina would listen to me. They all said I had to have 3 or more losses before they would even test progesterone. And in South Carolina, they said I had to have 2 or more losses. And I was like, so you mean more babies have to die in order for you to just listen to me? That doesn't make sense. And I wasn't willing to do that. So my parents found a doctor in Idaho that they were going to. And I live in North Carolina. That's a long ways away. And that doctor was like, oh yeah, she probably does have low progesterone because that's responsible for a huge amount of losses. So she prescribed progesterone for me sight unseen. Like she never met me and sent me progesterone supplements. And within 2 months of taking those, I was pregnant again, finally. During those 2 years prior, or year and a half, I think that I had probably 2 more losses, but they never were confirmed pregnancies. It was just, I was taking my basal body temperature and it was high for 20 days. And supposedly if it's high for 18 days, then you're pregnant. But with both of my confirmed pregnancies, I didn't have a positive pregnancy test until a week past when my period should have been due. So I didn't have positive tests with either of those 2, what I believe were pregnancies. And that doctor in Idaho confirmed my suspicions. And she was like, you probably did lose babies just really early. And that would also be a low progesterone thing. Started taking the progesterone, got pregnant with my son, and was like, okay, we are going to do a home birth no matter what. Like, this is what we're going to do. So we hired Amy Bixby Redmond. So Amy's nephew was the one born in our house when I was a kid. So I've known her family my whole life, not necessarily her personally, but her family my whole life. And so that connection that we had because of our families made my husband willing to trust her. And I already trusted her. But my husband was like, okay, if your family knows her, if she's related to Uncle John, who's my dad's best friend, then we can trust her. And he was still a little bit hesitant about the home birth thing, but he also distrusted hospitals. And a lot of that was just the way that the hospital treated us during our first miscarriage. And he was like, well, I guess this is the better of the 2 worlds. Let's try it. And as soon as literally the day I found out I was pregnant, I called Amy and I was like, hey, I want you to be my midwife. And I think I'm going to be due the end of February. Are you open? Or do you have openings? And she's like, yes, we do. So we got on her schedule and went through pregnancy, and it really was a super chill, really no issues pregnancy. We did have one point at about 18 weeks that I had been feeling movement before, and then all of a sudden I wasn't feeling movement, and it freaked me out for good reason. But we went down, saw Amy, and she was scared enough that she had called labor and delivery at Prisnet because she suspected that we were losing the baby too. Thankfully, when we got to her office, she immediately got out the Doppler and she's like, let's skip all the pleasantries. Let's just see if we can hear this baby. And we heard his heartbeat strong and loud right away. And then when I had my 20-week anatomy ultrasound, we saw that my placenta had moved to the front of my belly. And so the reason I couldn't feel him all of a sudden was because the placenta was shielding me from being able to feel him. And she just thinks that my uterus had a growth spurt and my placenta had moved up because of the growth spurt. And it was really weird and really scary at first, but it was normal. Everything was fine. So February came about and Amy's aunt, Bonnie, which we knew Bonnie's children in France. We had spent a summer with them in France when I was in college. And anyway, she went to France for the month of February and beginning of March so that we could use her house for our birth, which was incredible. She was kind of already planning on going to France, but she didn't know when. And so when she found out our due date, she's like, "Oh, I'll just go to France then." So she left for France and she was like, "You can use my house whenever you need it." And she's like, "Here's the key code and whatever you need." So actually, like, my son was born at 40 weeks and 6 days. And like the week and a half leading up to actually being in labor, I went down 2 or 3 times a week just to take a bath in the big bathtub in her house. And my mom went with me, and we had to do it that way because we lived in North Carolina and home birth midwives are very few and far between here. And even the ones that we do have usually are practicing illegally. Amy couldn't come up to North Carolina, so we had to go to her in South Carolina. February 19th, I guess, technically, I went into labor. Or no, not 19th, 25th. I went into labor. We went down to Greenville, and I had a pretty straightforward labor. I kept on saying, this feels way too easy to actually be labor. This is way too easy. And like could talk through contractions. They weren't really super painful. I just knew that they were there. But they got to be like 2 minutes, a minute and a half apart. And I was still fine, like walking around the yard and talking and everything was fine. And my husband was like, "I think we should call Amy because your contractions are really close." I was like, "Okay, sure, whatever." So Amy came and asked if she could check me, and I said yes. And when she checked, she was like, "Yeah, I don't think that you're in active labor, but your cervix is pointing backwards towards your spine, and that's not what we want." So she said, "I think that might be why you can't get into active labor really, is just because something is wrong, like musculoskeletally." And so she said, "Call your chiropractor and see if they'll come adjust you." And we had picked a chiropractor in South Carolina because they do home visits during labor to adjust moms. That's like the whole reason we even picked them. We called them, and when they got out of church that Sunday, they came straight to us, and Dr. Sam came in and she adjusted me during labor, and that was at like noon. And sure enough, it put me over right into active labor. And I was like, "Oh, this is the real thing now." And started making all the like active labor sounds and movements. And my husband was like, "Oh, I need to fill up the birth pool." And so he did that. And we called Amy probably about an hour after that. And she came over and she's like, "Yep, this is active labor. This is the real thing." And at one point, I made sounds like I was pushing, and the midwives come running into the room and they're like, "Are you pushing already?" And I was like, "I think so. I don't know." And I was not, apparently, because it still was a couple more hours before I was ready to push. But at like 3:30-ish, one of the midwives was like, "Hey, I think water might be slowing down your labor because you're too relaxed." And like I was falling asleep during contractions. Like I was really relaxed in there. And so they had me get out and they were like, "Why don't you do a couple contractions on the toilet?" And I knew what they were saying because I was a doula. We call the toilet the dilation station for a reason. And I was like, "I don't wanna get on the toilet because I know it's gonna hurt more." They were like, "Well, just do 3 contractions on the toilet." "Fine, I'll do it." So I got on the toilet for 3 contractions, and they were the most painful contractions in my whole labor for sure. But it did what it was supposed to do, and as soon as I got off the toilet, my water broke and I was in transition, and I was like, "Oh, this is the real thing now." And it was weird because, like, as a doula, I will tell most moms, don't labor on your back if you can avoid it, because that squishes your pelvis. It's not optimal for birth. But that's like listening to my body. I wanted to be on my back. So I got into the bed and laid down on my back, and Amy was like, "Okay, it's weird that you want to be here. So do you mind if I check you?" And I was like, "Sure, go for it." I mean, at that point, I did not care what anybody did to me. So she checked me and she's like, "Oh, yeah, so your baby is stuck on your pelvic bone. Like his head is very lodged on your pelvic bone." So she ended up having to pull his head down while I pushed to help get his head under. But me being on my back created that gravity pull that was necessary also to help him go down. So it was weird, like listening to my body and really feeling that intuition of my body to get him earthside. And when he was born, I was in total shock. Like, I don't think that I really believed that I would get to hold my baby until he was there. There was a big part of me that still believed that I couldn't have a living baby because I'd had loss before, and I was terrified of a full-term loss or something. So when they put him up on my chest and I heard him cry, then I was like, "Oh, this is real, and we did it, and our baby's here." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. I don't think everybody was crying, and and it was just this sweet little redemptive home birth, no issues whatsoever, and yeah, so that's my entrance to motherhood right there.
Just a little snippet of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, like, such a journey, and it really shows how you've come to be who you are and
Yeah.
what you've done, and you know, that's what it is. It's like in sharing our stories and each of us having, you know, a unique perspective to really, you know, how your husband was saying, like, "I think this is what you need to do," and then
Yeah.
your, you know, even as much as, like, your Instagram account being lost and then being like, "Okay, like, let's just see where this goes," and then just, like, having, like, such a connection to it. But what would you say does, like, bringing awareness to pregnancy after loss mean to you?
I think a lot of moms, lost moms, and people who have never been through loss both believe that when you get pregnant after a loss, that that fixes everything and that it heals your grief and that you don't grieve anymore. And there's almost this like nobody would say it out loud, but I think people think that once you are pregnant after loss and once your rainbow baby is born, that that baby replaces the baby that you've lost, or that you don't grieve the baby who is lost anymore, or that there is never sadness or grief anymore in your motherhood state. And then it's all joy and hope because you had a rainbow baby. And that's just not the case. Honestly, my husband said it minutes after Josiah was born that having him there and in our arms and watching him do what a newborn does almost made our grief deeper because we suddenly realized what we had missed out on with our first baby. Watching him grow and turn into a toddler and develop his own little personality, it makes us realize what we missed out on with Peanut and with those other two babies. Pregnancy After Loss Awareness Month is just saying, hey, grief and joy and hope and sadness and fear and love, they all coexist. They don't cancel each other out. And it's a good thing to hold space for all of those feelings in your pregnancy after loss. And yeah, I don't know if that really answered your question well, but
You know, what can you say, like, for all of the women that have reached out to you or families that have reached out to you, people that you have connected to, what do you feel is the most kind of like pivoting point or like how you said, like that realization, you know, maybe it does take having a full-term pregnancy to realize like, you know, I did have a miscarriage, I did have a loss that was, you know, a lost baby. Is that a common occurrence or
yeah, there are a lot of moms that, like, the moment they lose a baby, they're like, "Okay, I was a mother, this is a baby," and I'm one of those. There are other people who, because they never held a living baby, it's like they diminish their motherhood and they say, "I
Mhm.
can't be a mom because I have never given birth to life." And to that, I like to remind moms, like, from the moment of conception, science says that conception is where life begins. So from the moment of conception, you are a mom and you have carried life in your womb. And that is a huge pivotal moment for a lot of moms to realize, oh my goodness, I am a mom and I have carried life and I did give life to a baby, even if that baby didn't necessarily make it earthside or whatever. Your motherhood isn't contingent on whether your baby is alive, and it matters more that they lived. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So, yes, their death is a huge pivotal moment, but their life is so important and their life matters no matter how long it lasted, even if it was 5 weeks or 40 weeks or 50 years or 100 years. Like, life matters, and it doesn't matter how long that life lasts. And I think part of awareness of loss and awareness of pregnancy after loss is acknowledging that you are a mom to a living baby. And when you have a rainbow baby, that baby doesn't replace the baby who is lost. It's another life that you get to celebrate and that you get to rejoice in,
Mm.
no matter how long that life lasts. And that's important. And so having someone like me who comes in and says, "Hey, mom, you're a mom and your motherhood is important. And I'm going to acknowledge that," is really important for a lot of moms.
I'll preface with this. You do not have to answer it or elaborate if you don't feel comfortable. But in regards to the pregnancy after loss community, how do things differ between a choice of loss and a miscarriage?
Not a lot. Like, I think when you say a choice of loss, you're talking about like the TFMR, termination for medical reasons community.
Right.
Yeah. So that would be, I mean, it's TFMR is still a loss. There's still a baby who is loved and died. And so when you're pregnant again after that, it comes with the same fears and anxieties and guilt and all of those hard emotions. And it still also comes with the same hope and love and excitement at the same time. I mean, in pregnancy after loss comes with a lot of guilt for a lot of moms because they're afraid that they're replacing their baby. Sometimes for TFMR, that guilt can be even more than for a miscarriage or a stillbirth. But there still is all of the same emotions. There's still the grief over the baby who's lost and the hope over the baby who's coming and the fear of what if this happens again and all of that.
How can we best support somebody who is experiencing pregnancy after loss?
Acknowledge both of her babies. Like, still talk about the baby that was lost. I don't love to use that word because it wasn't, you're not just losing them, the baby died, but also using the word died can be really triggering too. So, but acknowledge both babies, still say the baby's names. And if she tells you that she's scared, say, "Yeah, I bet you are. That makes sense." If she tells you that she's afraid to even hope for this baby to make it her side, say, "I get that. And I will be holding hope for you." But also it's okay to be scared and it's okay to not know how to hope in that circumstance. If she tells you that she's really excited, then say, "Awesome, I'm super excited with you and super excited for you." Like, hold space for all of her emotions and give her room to talk about all the emotions that she has. Because sometimes moms who are pregnant after loss are afraid to talk about their emotions because it feels like people who haven't been through that don't understand, which is true in one sense, but just saying, "Hey, I bet you're scared and excited and still grieving and hoping all at the same time, and I'm here to hold space for all of those emotions with you."
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely something to point out, and I'm sure, it's a lot of those fears and what ifs and kind of like reaching the past or like reaching the point of their last pregnancy or, wondering like is this going to be the time? Like I know, if there's been multiple losses or how you were saying, you had to experience 2 or 3 before they would intervene with other medication and such, and you were, lucky enough to find somebody who did believe in you and did trust that what you were saying was how you were feeling, but I'm sure in other situations, that's not the case, and that's not what they're experiencing, so I think, in you spreading this awareness and you talking about even just that key point but yeah, I think, like, in, like, telling your story and, like, raising the awareness around something like that, it could be, the answer to somebody else's story and what they're going through and what they're experiencing. So, I
Yeah,
think
I've talked to so many moms that they feel so alone until someone like me talks about it. Says,
mm,
"Hey, if you're feeling this, that's normal and you're not alone." And there's just this so much relief that's like, "Oh, you mean my fear is okay? You mean that other people feel this too? Or you mean it's okay to continue to grieve my baby that's not here while being excited for the one who's coming?" Like, when you find people who've been through it, then there's so much solidarity and so much hope that comes from that. And I think that's why what I do is so important.
yeah. What would be another thing to really talk about that isn't commonly talked about that helps to spread awareness about even just loss or, the pregnancy after loss and infant loss and such?
So there's a term that I don't think I'm the one who coined it. I think I found it somewhere else, but I don't see it a lot of places beyond me. But it's scanxiety, which is anxiety over scans. And so many moms are so afraid of ultrasound specifically because most of us find out about our loss via ultrasound. And so going into a scan during pregnancy is terrifying. And that's a little practical thing, but like if we can just tell moms, hey, you're probably going to be scared going into an ultrasound, and it's okay to be scared. And here are some tips to help you get through that ultrasound without a panic attack. That's, I feel like, is probably the thing that I talk about the most with moms is just tips for making it through ultrasounds and scanxiety. So that's a little one. But, and then how important community is. One of my favorite people says all the time that by ourselves we think stupid. And it's true in pregnancy after loss. When you are alone, when you don't have that village that we talk about, you do think stupid. And it's hard to think logically. It's hard to hold hope when you're alone, which is why like I have a program that's a birth course, but then it also has a community of moms who are pregnant after loss all together so that they can encourage each other and build each other up and be that village for each other of moms who get it because they're in the same place that you are. Because no one gets lost moms like other lost moms, and no one gets moms who are pregnant after loss like other moms who are also pregnant after loss. And I think just building a village around yourself of people who understand it and who will support you and who won't let you think stupid is really important.
Yeah, I think, exactly what you were saying is so important. And I want to hear about other things that you have going on and such. But I do have a question that just kind of popped into mind when you were saying all this as well. What about partners? Like, how has this affected your husband? And how can, we also support partners who have experienced loss or having their partner go through pregnancy again after a loss?
That's good. Yeah, it did affect my husband, has affected my husband a lot because he came so close to losing me too during our loss. He had a little bit of PTSD. So men in general are protectors and providers. And when you go through something like a loss, that cuts into their identity the same way it does a mom, but because they couldn't protect their baby and they couldn't protect their wife from losing a baby, that cuts right into their identity to the point that a lot of men don't ever recover from that. And then the providing part of it is like, especially if you go through infertility like I did, like my husband told me, like, I want to give you a baby. I want to provide you with a baby and I can't. So those two things, like it cuts right at the core of who they are, who God made them to be. You do finally get pregnant after loss, then their instinct is going to be protect as much as possible. To the point that like my husband wouldn't let me walk outside in the rain during the first trimester of my pregnancy because he was so afraid of something happening to me or to the baby. And or like he didn't want to leave us at home. And he had to because he had to work, but he didn't want to leave us to go to work. And as soon as he would get home from work, his very first question would be, did you feel the baby move today? Or is everything okay today? And constantly wanting to protect. And that's a big part of the partner side of pregnancy after loss. And so when you start preparing for a birth, they want to protect, they want to provide. And birth is something that they can't control and they can't protect you from birth. And that can be really hard for a lot of men. Even if you haven't been through a loss before, it can be really hard for men to watch their wives go through birth or their partners through birth because they can't control it and they can't protect her from it. So during a pregnancy after loss, preparing a partner for that is really important. And talking to him and saying, hey, this is something that you can't control. You can't protect her from this. And so you have to learn how to surrender and you have to learn how to trust her and that her body knows what it's doing in birth. And our midwife was really helpful for that. She talked a lot about that God designed women for birth and that this is a normal and natural process. And And I did a lot of that too, saying there's going to be a time where it gets really intense in birth that you're going to freak out and you're going to be like, she's dying. And it's going to be okay. And so, like, watch Amy, because Amy will freak out if it's time to freak out, but she will be in control if everything's fine. So he did. He watched her like a hawk. And there came a point where I tore and there was blood. And blood is one of the most triggering things for my husband because that was what happened with our loss. And he said at that moment, he wanted to just scoop me up, throw me in the car, and take me to the emergency room. But he watched Amy, and Amy was calm, and Amy was like, yep, this is normal. She just tore a little bit. Everything is fine. And that helped him to speak truth to himself and calm down from that like emotional, wah, and to go, okay, this is normal. She said something like this might happen and that this would be normal. And that was good for us. So I almost think that a birth course is more important for a husband than it is for the wife because they need to know what's normal in birth.
Mm-hmm. So let us know, what you have going on, what you have coming up, how we can get in contact with you. Give us all of those connections.
Yeah. So I'm doing a workshop that will be on ways to manage anxiety during pregnancy after loss. And that'll be a free workshop. But then also, as part of the workshop, I'm relaunching my program that I talked about a little bit earlier. It's called Birthing Hope, and it's a birth course and a community and one-on-one access to me as a virtual doula, all specific to pregnancy after loss. And I think, there's a ton of amazing birth courses out there. I know that you guys, you are making an amazing birth course. But what's special about mine is that it's specific to pregnancy after loss. And we'll talk specifically to the fears and anxieties that come when you're pregnant again after miscarriage, TFMR, stillbirth, etc. So that's having
Yeah, I think it's so important to have like specific course geared toward that because it is a unique situation. It is a unique scenario and experience. And I think sometimes, there are people that are going to need that like extra support with that community because of their own experience and what they've been through. So I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And I think the support that you're providing is very much needed.
Well, thank you. And I'm excited for your birth course too. I think it's going to be incredible.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add, just in general for, even just people preparing for pregnancy or currently pregnant, like maybe even having fears of loss and they haven't even ever had loss, just any kind of final words that you would want to say?
First, if you are going through loss, trying to conceive after loss, pregnant after loss, whatever, you're not alone. And I know that that is such a cliche statement, but it's important to know you're not alone. And there's a whole community of us who are willing to open our arms to you, welcome you into the boss and PAL mom community, and we'll love you and all of your babies. If you're trying to conceive or pregnant and haven't been through loss, and my first piece of advice is to listen to your intuition. God gave us a gut for a reason, and it's worth listening to. I know a lot of lost moms who are like, if I had just listened to my intuition, then my baby might be here. Listen to your intuition. But then also, if you do end up going through a loss, it's going to feel like the end of the world. You're going to feel like you can't breathe again, that you'll never breathe again. Eventually, there's light again. And eventually, there's hope again. And I can't tell you how long that'll take because it's different for every single person. And a rainbow baby might not fix that for you. The rainbow baby might not be the source of hope for you, and that's okay too. But there is always hope. And if you need hope, come reach out to me and I'll help you find it. Yeah, I guess those would be my two things is listen to your intuition and then remember that in the darkest moments, if you do go through a loss, in those very darkest moments, there is still hope and you will start seeing light again someday.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and just saying, like everything that you've been up to and what's going on. And it's been great just chatting with you and getting to know you more and getting to know, your background and your story and, from your own birth
to now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really have looked forward to this for however long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, mamas, so much for listening. Remember, you are a rock star. I believe in you. Let's doula this. Let's crank it up a notch and let's kick it into high gear together. Hit that subscribe button, share this episode with a friend, message me, email me, call me, beat me. You know how to reach me. We're doing this, mamas. I am so excited to catch you here next week. This is your one-stop go-to place for helping you find the resources you need to make the best choices for you and your family during pregnancy, birth, and most importantly, postpartum. See you later, mamas.